You're buying a business because you think you can make it better. 2, you're passionate about it. And 3, you know that it's going to be there for a long time. So we want you to be committed and have at least a 5-year window when you buy a business.
Okay. I'm here with Seth Rudin, a senior business broker in the Seattle area, and today we're going to be talking about how he helps sell businesses, what makes a good candidate to buy, and how you can best prepare when thinking about selling or exiting your business. Let's get into it. You know, I am super curious, as well as a lot of people out there are kind of curious, what is it that you do? I'd love to just kind of get into that. How did you even get started in doing selling business brokerage services?
Sounds good. Let me start what IBA does and what I do as a business broker.
Okay.
So I basically help people retire from their business. Similar to you, I'm a real estate brokerage. Instead of selling houses, I'm selling businesses.
Okay.
Usually privately held, family-owned businesses. And typically the most reasons people want to sell their business for retirement, or they've done it for 8-10 years and they want a different challenge in their life, so we help them take an exit that way. I work with our clients to help them value their business, curate and find their buyer, and negotiate them to an offer, and then we work through the closing process. Working with bankers, landlords, attorneys, all the way through to closing at escrow. And IBA as a firm is locally in Bellevue, headquartered.
Okay.
We cover Washington and Oregon. I'm licensed in both states to sell.
Nice.
And I can sell the real estate as well as the business.
Okay.
Oftentimes I'll partner, like with you, on certain transactions together. And we've done this over 4,300 times since 1975.
Incredible.
We have about 20 different brokers like myself who serve all industries across a full spectrum, from manufacturing, industrial, to professional services, to cannabis, alcohol, and so forth. We'll drive to where we go. We only get paid on a success fee.
Only when it closes and when you sell it.
Exactly.
Okay.
We are successful 85 to 90% of the time when we do. Obviously, we're very selective, in those businesses that we take on. How did I get into this? So I was once a owner of a business. I founded it and then built it up.
Well, what kind of business?
It was a car service technology. So we built an app that linked all the limousine companies together across the globe. And we were on sites like Expedia, Trip.com, Booking.com.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay.
We sold that in 2019, and then I got my real estate license and entered the business brokerage market, and I've loved it ever since.
Amazing. What a story. I love it.
I appreciate it.
What's a typical size of a company that you sell?
Sure, the companies can vary in size. Typically, it's companies $1 million in revenue and up. It could be as high as $50 million. Our sweet spot is typically $2 to $10 million.
Okay. And in your experience, what kind of companies are those?
As an example, I'm selling an apparel company. I have a manufacturing company that I'm negotiating with. I have a professional services company. I have a greenhouse company that you're helping me out on, as you know. And I've sold retail franchises for resale. We've sold cannabis businesses, wineries, etc.
What's the most popular business that you see?
The most desired business to buy are car washes and laundromats. They will go fast and quick, typically because they don't involve a lot of people. And so owners like something that's durable, has high velocity, and that they can sort of not have to manage, hands-on. But overall, if it's profitable and it's growing and it's got earnings over $400,000, there'll be a line of people usually to buy it.
Nice. So how do you get financing for purchasing a business, or people just buy cash? How does that work?
Sure. So there's 3 ways. One is they bring cash, obviously. That's a small pool of buyers who can afford to do that. The second is the U.S. government has a small business administration loan program called SBA loans.
Okay.
And that is probably where 70% of our loans get businesses get financed. They have different programs, one for land and real estate with the business, and one just for real estate. And then the third one is seller providing a financial note.
So that's them financing the business?
Correct.
Okay. And how does that work? Does the seller you create an agreement with the seller on, paying the certain terms and, rate and et cetera, just like seller?
We work with the seller's attorney, and we draft a promissory note, and usually secured with some type of lien or personal guarantee. And so if the balance of the business, say, is $2 million and say $1 million in cash and $1 million in a seller note, then the buyer would sign a promissory note to the seller saying he owes them $1 million, say at the U.S. prime rate, and to be paid monthly for 5 years.
Okay. Until it's paid off.
Until it's paid off.
Got it. Okay. Very interesting. I'm sure, that it's not as easy to get. I'm sure there's, guidelines that bankers put forward for those transactions, right?
Yes, exactly. Okay. It's a thorough process. It requires, a clean credit record. They want to make sure you have the liquid capital to start off. They got working capital in the bank. And they're going to check what's called the debt service ratio, where they're going to see is the earnings of the business able to cover the debt service. So you take the monthly debt that you're going to be paying the bank times 12 for 12 months. Okay. And then you divide that into
You're doing the math there, right? Yes. That's awesome. How will you work with a buyer in a transaction? Someone comes to you, says, I want to buy a business. How do you handle that?
IBA is a sell-side business brokerage. So what that means is we represent the seller exclusively.
Okay.
And we will have buyers come in. Most buyers, they're entrepreneurs. They don't necessarily want to, work through a buyer broker because then they're hearing things through somebody else. But we will work from time to time, with a buyer broker. But when we do work with a buyer who's unrepresented, we'll provide them information that they need, and then they'll make a decision. They're aligning themselves with their own attorney, as well as a CPA and a financial advisor through the transaction to make sure that they're professionally represented. Sometimes there is a buyer broker that's fielding questions and participating, but we're always speaking with the buyer, even with the buyer broker involved in the transaction. And if there is a buyer broker involved, we will share a commission part just like you would in any real estate transaction.
Okay. So say somebody is interested in buying a business. Let's say they want to buy a laundromat. How do they go about finding that business? Is there a portal that they go to, like a Zillow for businesses? How do they find it?
There's 4 ways. One, they enter into our buyer database, and then.
But they call you, correct? They contact you?
Well, they've already contacted us in the beginning.
Okay.
If we know who they are, they may have contacted us. We encourage them to join our buyer database program. We send them the listing ahead of time. 2, we'll publish it on publicly sites like bizbuysell.com, and that's a common place for all businesses to be located. And then they'll respond to an inquiry. That'll be somebody at IBA never met usually. Sometimes it's people we have, and then we'll engage with the buyer that way.
Okay.
Those are the most common ways. Or I've met them in the past. Maybe it didn't work out in a prior transaction for whatever reason, but I know that they're interested in laundromats in this situation, so I'll send them, hey, I have a new listing. It's a laundromat. I know you had told me you're interested in it. Do you want to engage?
Okay. So you must participate in a lot of business forums, things like that, where you connect with potential buyers and sellers there, right?
Correct. And the other way I forgot to mention is a strategic acquirer. Somebody we recognize might have a synergy or benefit from buying the particular company I'm selling.
Okay.
And
how does that work?
So we'll cold call them. We'll call them up and saying, hi, Alina, are you interested in this business? I see a potential synergy for you owning it. Is this something you'd like to engage on? And then that triggers a conversation.
Very nice.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, but it's like a whole world out there of business buying and selling businesses. So.
It's exciting. It's very challenging. Every day is different, and every deal has its own nuanced situation we have to get over, just like selling a home, I'm sure.
So if you could tell me a story that maybe the most challenging deal that you've ever had or the most interesting, I want to hear a story.
Okay.
I know we have to keep everything confidential, but hey,
Sure.
Company A, Company B.
We'll start with this one. This one was unique. It was an escrow company, and I never understood how stressful it can be to have an escrow company. And so when I met the sellers, were the only escrow company on a particular island in Washington State, and so they had a market unique selling point, and I knew they had value. And so when I met them, I went on vacation. I said, can you wait to meet me before I list it? And they said, yes. So I went on my vacation. In the middle of my vacation, they threw up their hands and said, I'm so stressed, I'm just going to shut this down and walk away from a business that had a lot of value. I called them up. I said, why would you do that? I can help you get value from this. Just send me your financials. Let me do an assessment. And then you're only going to pay me if I sell it, so it costs you nothing. And fortunately, they agreed.
Okay.
And then they told me that they're going to close down and not take any orders after December 31st, regardless of what I say. So I said, okay, I'll take that challenge. I don't encourage this. Please don't do this ever again.
Yeah.
And so I was fortunate to have found 3 large escrow title companies who were willing to expand and take over. They saw the competitive advantage that they were getting a puzzle piece that was unique for them. And so we were able to sell it despite the orders shutting down. So even in January when we closed the transaction, orders had stopped and the buyer accepted it and paid the full price we asked for.
That's amazing. I love stories like this.
Yes, thank you.
What about a challenging one?
That was challenging, trying to convince someone.
I mean, it was successful in the end, though.
Okay.
Right? No?
Yes.
It wasn't successful.
I'm always successful.
Yeah.
Just easy.
I mean, it was painful, yes.
Yes. I'll give 2 more examples. So one success and one where it didn't work out.
Okay.
So a gentleman, very good guy, still friends with today. He was a manufacturing rep for another company's product. And in the end, they really wanted to be the one to decide who a successor was, even though the contract allowed him to find a successor with their reasonable approval. And unfortunately, despite us doing all the right things and getting the right buyer, that company chose not to award it to my seller's, buyer that we identified, had under contract for a very nice amount. And he had a personal relationship with the chairman of the company, and it just didn't work out. And it was very disappointing and sad. I even spoke to the chairman personally to try to encourage this to overcome. We did all the things right. He's a great gentleman. It's an unfortunate situation we couldn't foresee.
Yeah.
And then the last one that was successful was a escape room business.
Escape room business?
Escape room.
Okay.
So
I've been to one, I think.
It could be the same one.
It could be that one.
So we had to find a buyer for it. We found one international. They're located in Europe. And they had great credit. They had over 27 locations. They're still building today. They even have one in one of the largest casinos in Las Vegas. So this is a great customer, great buyer. But the landlord, who's with a big party, decided not to sign a lease with them because the party was out of the country and felt that there was more cash out of the United States than there was inside. So we had to negotiate a special term for him to basically lease to own the business instead of a straight sale, where at the end he would own the business and he would basically sublease, the space. And we were able to get this deal done. Took a lot of stress, and that was our only option to succeed here, when really that buyer was actually, much stronger financially suited than my actual client.
My goodness. But still, you got it done.
We got it done.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you very
amazing.
much.
I love stories like that. You speak of credit. So how does credit work for businesses?
Sure. So usually the buyer, right, could either be an individual or a business. So it all comes down to if the business is buying another business.
Okay.
Then the bank or the investing party, right, whether it's the seller doing a promissory note, is going to look at both the major shareholders of the company at a personal level, as well as the balance sheet of the company.
Okay.
And they'll look at how much cash is on the balance sheet, what's the net working capital, the current assets minus current liabilities, and then look at the income producing each year to see, again, that debt service ratio we talked about.
Okay. But it's not like a reporting, you've got FICO, right? Like buyers reporting on their...
If it's a large company, they might look at a Dun & Bradstreet score.
Okay.
Usually at the space, we're looking at a 20, our sweet spot's 2 to 10 million.
That probably doesn't
So
include,
usually in that space, it doesn't
Got it.
apply.
Okay. That makes sense. If someone wants to sell their business, what are some of the things they need to do to prepare to sell it? What are the most valuable things that would help you sell the business successfully?
I always find that the business owner who plans and prepares for the sale in advance has a much better outcome than the person who
in a home sale.
Who comes exactly who comes at the last minute and says, "Hey, I want to sell it now. I'm burnt out. I'm ready to go."
Yeah.
So in that time leading up to the sale, we can have a roadmap. And so we would be organizing financials, making sure everything's coordinated. We would be doing evaluation just like we would before, but at least now you can take that valuation to your financial advisor to make sure that that's going to fit in your tax status. If you have a really high sale coming in, you want to try to minimize your tax implications. So
Right.
we engaging your CPA and your financial advisor. We'll be making sure that the legal structure and legal documents are in place. If we need a third party to consent on the sale, if you're representing in any form of distributorship or franchise or some form of that can be. And then understanding the lease and preparing the landlord for that. All those things can lead up. And even if they have a thing called founder's dilemma, that is
Okay.
where the owner is doing 90% of the work in the business versus on the business. Well, that means they're
Yeah.
very
Right.
important to the business. Then maybe we can help prepare and hire a general manager to take off that stress, so the buyer sees it being a more valuable business for them. And then lastly, customer concentration. If you're selling a business that has a high customer concentration to one particular business, then if you have time to prepare for it, if you increase sales, you can dilute that percentage in making your business more valuable. So those are some of the key things that you can do to help raise the value at the time we take it to the market.
What about some of the things that would like trip up a sale?
Sure. Our job is to help navigate these nuances for you. And so one would be bankers not having clear and transparent. They might get concerns that we could have prepped for it, so we have to navigate the banking situation. Again, landlords, we talked about that earlier, they can also cause pain in the trend. And then some attorneys who are not trained in a mountain out of an anthill that an experienced M&A attorney would otherwise know it's not that big a deal.
I see. How long does it take to sell a company?
Usually, if there's no third-party approval, it should take anywhere from 4 to 9 months. And then depending if it's a gas station or something that requires a state approval because of an environmentally is required for selling a business with real estate and it requires a phase 2, then that could certainly take it up to 12 months, 12 to 15 months in some cases.
What's the longest you ever took to sell a business?
Let's say 15 months.
That's not bad.
No, agreed.
What's the shortest?
2.5 months.
Wow, that's like
All
come
cash.
in- Oh, that's
All cash offer, laundromat.
Cash is king, right?
Yes.
Okay. What advice would you give a buyer who bought one of your clients' businesses?
Sure. So now they're taking over ownership. Obviously, my goal is to make sure their legacy of my client's business is successful. And hopefully the buyer also, when they go to sell, will consider using us, is to do no harm in the first year. So you're buying a business that presumably is working. So going in and making radical changes is probably not a good idea. You need to learn about it. There's actually a really good book. It's mainly for people working in the workforce, but those lessons apply to anybody. It's called The First 90 Days.
I see.
So
I
you
think
take-
I've heard of that book.
It's a great book. So you take the first 90 days to sort of learn the business, don't make big changes, build good relationships with your new team because you just inherited them, and you got to build a good rapport so that they follow you. All businesses are about how strong the team is, and so we want you to do that. And then gradually introduce change into the business for the better. Try to model it out, in a spreadsheet and hire and surround people that you found are covering the weaknesses of the business. You're buying a business because you think you can make it better. 2, you're passionate about it. And 3, you know that it's going to be there for a long time. If you ask me to sell a business a year after you bought it, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
If you ask me to sell a house a year after, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, I get that, yeah.
But selling a business, the buyers are going to say, well, why did Alina buy this business? Now she wants to sell it a year later.
Such
What's
a short
wrong
amount
with
of time.
it?
Like, what's wrong? Yeah.
Exactly. So we want you to be committed and have at least a 5-year window when you buy a business.
Okay. Is the recent increase in like financing, the rates affect the business? Has that affected,
Certainly.
your line of work?
It has, driven down the marketability of certain businesses. So there is an impact to the valuation today for that. Second, it does change the ways we finance projects. Now, a profitable business will attract buyers regardless, and it'll be willing for them to overcome. There's higher, the rate structure of risk, right? The businesses are at the top of the risk, whereas like equities and bonds are at the bottom, right, tier. So buyers will find a way to get the deals financed, whether they go through a bank, they'll go through private investors, or they'll use the seller, promissory note to help them get the deal done.
Okay. Have you seen or have you dealt with like a very risky business and you decided not to take that on as a client?
Yes, I have. So I've seen businesses that, they weren't.
What type of business was it?
It could be a variety of business.
Okay.
I'm looking as the business something that I feel like the buyer community wants to buy. The financials are strong and are consistent between the tax returns, the P&Ls, and return and income. This is one of the most important things. Is am I buying a job or am I buying a business? So if I have a business that's producing $150,000 in income a year in Seattle, they're probably better off working for Amazon or somebody else that they can generate a higher income than taking on the risk of meeting payroll and having all the stresses of owning a business. So that is generally something that we'll watch out for.
Have you ever worked with like franchisees?
Absolutely. So we've helped
Like UPS and Subways and things like that, right?
I sold a plate against sports in King County.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the gentleman was retiring after 30 years. He had 2 stores between him and his brother. They narrowed it down to 1. It's a great store. It's in the top 5 locations in the 290 stores in their network across the country. It was a fabulous client, and we sold that.
That's great.
We even have a franchise department on our team that helps if buyers don't want to buy an existing business. So there's really 3 ways for someone to get into business. The hardest one, which I did, is to start a business from scratch. And now you got to convince someone to go into a new business with maybe a new product and train them, and that has a high cost. Second, you can buy a franchise with, again, no new customers, but you have a brand and you have structure to lean on, still risky. Or 3, you can buy an existing business. So if you sort of look at it like a riverbed and you have water in it, do you want to put a boat in it and have to put the water in the river to go, or do you want to buy a boat that has a river already in it and you're just throttling it as fast as you want to go?
That's a great analogy.
I credit my boss, Gregory Koski, for that one.
That's a good analogy, actually. Like, you're like, yeah, exactly. Like, what. Thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate all your time. It was awesome to sit down with you and learn more about the business brokerage side, and I hope that we can work together again very soon. And if you guys have any questions, I will leave all the contact information for Seth Rudin at IBA. Thank you, Seth, so much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
I'm
oh my
honored.
God,
Appreciate
yeah.
it. Thank you.